Good morning. Today we're going to be learning Maseches Yoma, Daf Mem Daled. We're starting at the opening of the Gemara at the very bottom two lines on Daf Mem Gimel on the base. In our Mishnah, it says that the person who was going to stir the blood to make sure that it wouldn't congeal seemed to have accompanied the Kohen Gadol into a holy area while he was doing his avodah. It says the Gemara, that's very problematic. We have a pasuk that says, "V'chol adam yehiyeh b'ohel moed," and no one's allowed to accompany the Kohen Gadol in this particular place. So therefore, how can he just hand the blood to someone who's going to make sure that it doesn't congeal? No one's allowed to be with him. He has to be alone. So it says the Gemara, Amar of Yehuda Tani Shel Heichal. You're right. He wasn't standing on the fourth set of tiles in the Heichal, but from the Heichal outside of the Kodesh area into the area of the Azara. Now we're going to learn a brisa that speaks about these rules in general. Of course, the pasuk, as we just quoted, the pasuk says that no one is allowed to be in the Ohel Moed. Says the Gemara on the top of Mem Daled. Maybe we would assume that this is true even outside of the holies and in the larger area of the Mikdash, still the Kohen space. But maybe I would have thought that you're not allowed to accompany him when he does his avodah there. No, and it says Be'ol Moed, it only means in the Kodesh, in that space of the inner sanctum of the Beis Hamikdash. Really, I only have this pasuk as in the midbar. We're not talking. The pasuk may have been local. How do we know that it applies to Dorei Doros? What about Shiloh when the Mishkan was in Shiloh or Beis Olamim? What about the regular Beis Hamikdash Minayin? How do we know that over there that we have these halachos as well? Talmud Amar Kodesh, in any area that has this level of sanctity, so just like the Ohel Moed in the midbar had that level of sanctity, so too the Heichal has this level of sanctity. Says the Gemara 3 lines down in the El B'Shas HaKtorah. I only know that there's an Isra of accompanying the Kohen when he's doing the HaKtorah, when he's doing the Ktoras in the Heichal itself. What about B'Shas Matan Damim Minayin? What if he isn't doing the Avodah of the Ktoras? What if he's doing the avodah of sprinkling the blood inside the heichal? Do we have the same isser of accompanying Kohen? Says the Gemara, yes, we do. And when he's doing any work inside the heichal that has to do with kapara, so that of course includes this rikas dam. We're going to discuss whether or not the Ktoras has the capacity to generate kapara. We'll discuss that shortly. But certainly, when it comes to rikas dam, that's not a shiur. That's all. Every korban's like that. Says the Gemara 6 lines down, saying the Elabik also. This is only true. Maybe I should only assume that there's an Isser of accompanying the Kohen when he's on the way into the Mikdash or during the Avodah. What if he's on his way out? Can I go inside to greet if I were a Kohen, can I go inside and greet him and walk out with him? Says the Gemara, that's also Asr B'Yitzias. I'd say so. No. The Isser of accompanying the Kohen is until he leaves the Heichal. You can't even go in to bring him out. What does the pasuk mean when it says the brisa continues? It says the Gemara. It says the Gemara that the pasuk is in sequential order. First, it's in kaparaso kodems kaparas beso. He first has to get his own kapara. As we said yesterday, it's better for someone who is zakai to ask for kapara for those who are chayiv than it is for someone who is chayiv to ask for kapara for those who are chayiv. So therefore, the Kohen Gadol goes first. And once he's generated kapara for himself, then it can also be the kaparas beso and kaparas beso. Kademus the kaparas echava kohanim. He first has to take care of his family and make sure that his family has kapara. Only after which he can then focus on echava kohanim. And then the kaparas echava kohanim. Kademus the kaparas kol kahal yisrael. Jewish people en masse are last in the line. So it's the Kohen Gadol himself, his family, and then echava kohanim, and then kol kahal yisrael. Amar Mar in the El B'Shas HaKtorah says the Gemara, my mashma. How do you know that this is true? That we're talking about during a moment of HaKtorah that we have the Isser of accompanying the Kohen into the Heichal. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava v'chin Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi v'chin Amar Rav Elazar. A lot of the Amoraim. Amar Rav v'chiper ba'ado v'ad beso v'ad kol kahal Yisrael. That's what the pasuk says. The pasuk that we just read. Now, under what circumstances is this true? Says the Gemara, Ezu kapara. When is there a moment that we can have kapara sheshaveh lo ulebeso lechva kohanim b'chol kal Yisrael? What is a singular moment when there can be kapara for all of these groups? I shouldn't say singular, I should say a sequential set of moments where you can generate kapara for everyone. So it says the Gemara, Avi Omer Zaktaras Aktores. That's how we know that there's an Isser to be with the Kohen with the Kohen Gadol in the Heichal when he's doing Torah. Then interjects the Gemara and says, hold on one second. We know that we get kapara by zrikas adam, varm pshuta. But it says the Gemara, Ktoris mechaperes. I mean, it's an avoda, but it's not zrikas adam. There is no dam, there's no animal. It's spices, right? That's the 11 spices. So it says the Gemara, how do we know that it's mechaperes? It's Gemara in fact, it is. We're 1/3 of the way down, Mem and Aleph. The Hatani Reb Chananya, Amanu Lektoris mechaperes. We do know that Lektoris can generate kapara. Shene'emar, because the pasuk says, "Aitain esak Torres by chaper al ha'am," and this is a pasuk that is speaking about the story of Korach. This is the pasuk from Bamidbar Yudayin. So the pasuk reads in full, "Vayikach Aharon asher diber Moshe vayoratz al toch hakal v'nei hechel hanegef ba'am." This was, of course, the story of Korach when Korach va'Adasa rebelled against Moshe, saying that he had taken too much of the kavod, that he took everything, he took all the kavod, and the Torah generated kapara and stopped the magefa that was taking place by the times of Korach. Waharaya, says the Gemara, that's obvious that we therefore see that there's kapara by Torahs. And then a beautiful Gemara, a very short Agadata, just a couple of lines, says the Gemara as follows, halfway down with Tana de Bervishmo, Al-Mak Torahs Mechaperes, and which Averos does the Torahs generate kapara? It says the Gemara al Lashon Hara. It's on the ill speech that we say of others. Of course, to be clear, Lashon Hara is when you say something that is derogatory about another person that's true. That's different than the Isra of Motzi Shemra, which is saying something that's derogatory about someone that isn't true. Very different categories of halacha. They're all very problematic. Just to add another one to the mix is Rechilus, all the famous Isurim that we know about. All of these require intensive study to make sure that we get it right. So that there are times that it's mutter to speak negatively when it's litoelas, or you're hiring someone in dating scenarios. There's plenty of scenarios that come up that are litoelas. But the fact that someone says, oh, saying something not nice about someone that's true, but it's litoelas, that doesn't make it mutter. The toelas has to be real. These are real shilas in the postgame. When do you disclose things that are in fact negative about people on the dating process? It's not simple. They all require a lot of shilas. But when one is in a violation of the Yisra of Lashon Hara, they need kapara. And unfortunately, we don't have the Torahs to generate that kapara. So Halavai, Mir Hashem, we should have it soon. But in the meantime, we have to daven and clap al chait, al chait shechatanu lefanecha b'lashon hara, because we don't have the Torahs to take care of that right now. And in fact, the Gemara explains a little bit more. Yavo davar shebichshai v'chaper al maisa chshai. We need this thing which is a davar shebichshai. The Torah is done in secret. It's done in private. It's done lifnai v'lifnim. And we need that as a kapara, a lashon hara, which is also a ma'asech shai. You're not screaming it from the rooftops; you're whispering it to one person, and that's how lashon hara typically is transmitted. We're now going to get into a discussion, starting at the halfway point on Mem Dalet Amud Aleph, about the kedusha of the heichal in comparison to the kedusha of the space just outside the heichal, between the heichal and the mizbeach. Is that d'oraisa? Is that d'rabbanan? Is it just out of sheer concern that you might walk in the wrong place? And all of it is going to be looked at through this lens of the Kohen Gadol. This says the Gemara as follows: Tanan Hasam, we have a Mishnah. The Mishnah writes, portion mibein ha'ulam al-mizbeach b'shas haktorah. The Mishnah writes that when there is shas haktorah, when inside the heichal, when they're doing the Torahs, the halacha is that you have to leave the area between the ulam and the mizbeach. Namely, the Isser of accompanying the Kohen Gadol is not only inside, it even has a ring around it that you're not allowed to enter. So if he's inside doing the Torah Lifnai V'Lifnim, it's Yom Kippur. So you no Kohanim are allowed to be even, sure you can't be in the Heichal, you can't be in the Ulam either, but the space outside the antechamber and in between the Mizbeach and the antechamber, you cannot be there either. That's what the Mishnah writes. Amar Rebbe Lazar, he gives a qualification of the Mishnah, Lo Shanu. When is that Mishnah true that you have to be Koresh, that you're not allowed to be in that second space, that second ring around the Heichal? That's true, he says, B'shas HaKtorah the Heichal. That's when you're doing the Ktoras of the Heichal. So just a little background. Every day the Ktoras was brought by the Kohen, and it was brought in the Heichal, in the main sanctuary. That was the daily Ktoras. However, the one that was brought only once a year, or the Ktoras that was brought on Yom Kippur. It wasn't brought in the main sanctuary of the Heichal, but it was brought lifnai v'lifnim, next to the paroches. So these are different moments. One takes place every day of the year, and the other takes place one day a year. So this is the qualification that Rabbi Elazar is making. When the Mishnah says that you're not allowed to be between the ulam and the mizbeach, between the antechamber and the mizbeach, while the Kohen's inside doing the avodah, he says that's true. B'shas haKtorah deheichal. That's true when you're doing the day-to-day Ktoras, not Yom Kippur. However, aval b'shas haKtorah delifnai v'lifnim, but on Yom Kippur, the halacha is only meheichal parshi. You only have to leave the actual room itself. No other kohanim can accompany the Kohen Gadol into the main room. They can't go into the heichal, while the Kohen Gadol is doing the Torah's lifnai, the lifnim, in the inner sanctum. That's the distinction. Aval b'shas haKtorah delifnai. Says, let me just read Rabbi Elazar again. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Lo shanu el b'shas haKtorah deichal, aval b'shas haKtorah delifnai v'lifnim. When the Kohen Gadol was going to do the avodah in the innermost sanctum, the Kodesh Kodashim, the Heichal Parshi, there he has to leave. The other Kohanim cannot accompany him even in the Heichal, but we don't need to have a double measure of safety. We're just saying that when you're doing the avodah lifnai v'lifnim, the one ring outside of that is the Heichal. Fine, there you're not allowed to have people, but the ring outside of that, there you are allowed to have people. That was the question. That was the qualification of Rabbi Elazar. We're going to question that with about a 15-line question against Rabbi Elazar. Let's go. Or 2/3 of the way done. Masi Rabbi Barab, Amr la Kidi. Some say it was a person named Kidi. Yosi Omer Kishem Sheportion Mibein Ha'ulam Ulam Yisbeach. Just like one is obligated to leave the space between the Ulam and the Mizbeach b'shat Torah, we're assuming this brisa is dealing with a case of lifnai v'lifnim. It says the Gemara that we assume that when the Kohen Gadol is doing the Torah's lifnai v'lifnim, that one even has to separate from the Ulam and the Mizbeach, not like Rabbi Elazar. Kach portion b'shas matan par Kohen Mashiach u'par helam davar shel tzibur sirei avodas kochavim. Not only is it true, says this brisa, not only is that true lifnai v'lifnim, that when the Kohen Gadol is lifnai v'lifnim, that we don't only restrict other Kohanim from being in the Heichal, but we even restrict other people from being ben ulam and mizbeach. But it's also true by 3 other korbanos. What are these 3 other korbanos that have the same din? So one of them is called the matan par Kohen Mashiach. This is when the Kohen Gadol paskins incorrectly on something and does something wrong due to that psak. And par ha'elam davar shel tzibur is when the Sanhedrin in the Beis HaMikdash paskin on something, and Klal Yisrael behaves in a way that they shouldn't, but it was based on the psak of the Sanhedrin. And the last one is actually an iteration of the second one, and that is what's referred to as the Seirei Avodas Kochavim. Really, it's a par ha'elam davar shel tzibur, that the Chachamim had paskin, the Sanhedrin had paskin that something was mutter, and the domino effect of that psak was that Jews started doing things that were betor in the camp of Avodas Kochavim. When these 3 korbanos are brought, they have the same din. That when the Kohen Gadol is lifnai v'lifnim, that no one is allowed to be in the 2 rings. Not only are you not allowed to be in the ring that is the Heichal, which is outside the Kodesh HaKodashim, not the Kodesh HaKodashim is where the Kohen Gadol can't be in the Heichal. You also can't be outside of the Heichal between the Mizbeach and the Ulam. Says the Gemara, continuing in this brisa, what is the categorical difference between the Heichal and the Mizbeach? After all, it seems to be from the beginning of this brisa that both the Heichal and the space outside the Heichal between the Ulam and the Mizbeach have the same status. They're both restricted spaces for other Kohanim, so that they're not going to violate the Isser of Chol Adam Lo Yihye Be'ohel Moed. So what's the difference? It says the brisa 3/4 of the way down, 10 lines from the bottom, 11 lines from the bottom. In the Heichal, in the Kodesh, not the Kodesh HaKodashim, but in the Kodesh, where the menorah is, and the Mizbech and the Shulchan. In that room portion, the Kohanim have to leave the Kohen Gadol alone, ben b'shas haktorah, ben shelo b'shas haktorah, when he's doing the Ktoros, and even when he's doing non-Ktoros work, namely when he's doing Zrikas Hadah. Mibein ha'ulam u'mizbech in portion of b'shas haktorah. So we see that the Heichal is more strict because we kick out the Kohen from accompanying the Kohen Gadol under 2 circumstances, by Haktarah and by Zrikas Hadah. Masha'en came, when it comes to the Ulam and the Mizbech, the space just outside the antechamber, outside the Ulam, in the larger Azara area between the Mizbech and the Ulam, in that case, you only have to leave that concentric ring during Haktarah, but not during the actual Zrikas Hadah. The Shas Haktarah Mia Parshi. So what do we see here? We see here that Ben Ulam and Mizbech, Rabbi Elazar was wrong. Rabbi Lazar wanted to qualify, as we started halfway down on the page, he wanted to qualify the Mishnah that we quoted from Maseches Kalim. He wanted to qualify and say that's only true in the, it's only true when it's a regular Torah. During the regular Torah, then no one can be between the Heichal and the Mizbeach. Says the Gemara, that's not true. It's even when it's Lifnai B'Lifnim, namely it's two rings, it's two concentric rings of prohibition of other Kohanim. So my love, the Shafak the Lifnai B'Lifnim. Isn't this Brisa speaking about Lifnai B'Lifnim? In which case, yes, in fact, it's two rings of restriction for other Kohanim so that we don't violate the Isser that we learned on the bottom of Mem Gimel on the base of the Pasuk Mecholadim Lo Yehiyeh B'Ohel Moed. Says the Gemara, no, that Brisa was speaking about something else, B'Shas Haktar Dehechal. Says the Gemara, if that Brisa is only talking about the Shas Haktar Dehechal, well, good job on Rabbi Lazar. You solved his problem because Rabbi Lazar said that if you're doing the, that was his qualification. That was his qualification to the Mishnah and Kalim. He had said that in the Mishnah and Kalim, that if the Kohen Gadol is doing the daily tzoras, then you're not allowed to be Ve'enu Lo Mizbeach. And we're re-explaining this new brisa to say the same thing. Very good, you solved that problem. But you did something that was a little difficult as well, which is that now there's not really much of a difference between the Heichal and the Ve'enu Lo Mizbeach. So asks the Gemara, 6-7 lines from the bottom, Yihachi, ha ma mala, quote, we said in the brisa, ma ma'ala, we said there was an elevated status of Heichal compared to the Ulam Mizbeach. Says Gemara V'Sulo. Well, hold on 1 second. We have to see what the distinction is now because you just changed everything by reinterpreting the Brisa to not be talking about the Torah Sifnai B'Lifnim, but now the Brisa is talking about the daily Torahs. So therefore, we have to try and re-understand how Ika HaMaila. There is still another Maila. Says the Gemara. Ilu Mehechal Parshi Bein B'Shas Hektar Didei Bein B'Shas Hektar D'Lifnai B'Lifnim. From the Heichal, no one can accompany him for either type of like Torahs, either the daily one, referred to here as the Haktar Day, or the Haktar that's Litnai V'Lifnim, the one that's done on Yom Kippur. So the Gemara paints a distinction, and then the Gemara says, well, we have to see how this plays out in the Brisa. That's not what our Brisa says. It says the Gemara, here's how we should understand our Brisa. 3 lines from the bottom, Hakatani, how does the Brisa read? In the Heichal, in the Kodesh space, portion, bein b'shas haktara, bein shelo b'shas haktara. As discussed, we need someone, the Kohanim, to leave. We don't want to violate the Isra b'choladim lo yehiyeh b'ohel moed. So whether or not there's haktara taking place or zrikas adam, the other Kohanim have to leave. Ben ulam l'mizbeach in portion, and between the ulam and the mizbeach, the Kohanim don't have to leave them alone. Ela b'shas haktara. Only true by shas haktara, so the distinction still applies. We just had to re-understand the Brisa within our new understanding of the Brisa in order to make Rabbi Lazar still fit with that Brisa. Says the Gemara, yeah, I know you said there's one mile in the Brisa, but really there's another one. Either Mehechal Parshi, that from the Heichal, here's another difference, says the Gemara. We're adding to the Brisa, or we're attempting to. Why didn't the Brisa say as follows? We should have added this distinction. The either Mehechal Parshi, Bein B'Kedusha Didei, Bein B'Kedusha D'Mai. Here, the word Kedusha is a reference to Zrikas Adam. It says the Gemara, in regards to the Heichal, no other Kohanim can accompany the Kohen Gadol when he does the Zrikas Adam in the Heichal, or when he does the Zrikas Adam Lifnai V'Lifnim. However, 3rd line, the Ilu Mibein HaUlam and Mizbeach Lo Parshas B'Kedusha the Heichal. But between the Mizbeach and the Ulam, no one needs to separate. No other Kohanim need to leave that space. There's no issue of accompanying the Kohen Gadol. Only the only time we have to clear that space, says the Gemara, when we do Zrikas Adam, is if the Kohen is doing the Zrikas Adam in the Heichal. Had he been doing the Zrikas Adam Lifnai V'Lifnim, then it's only one concentric ring, and only the Heichal would have been prohibited, not the space outside the Heichal, but between the Mizbeach and the Ulam. It says the Gemara, why didn't we add this into our Brisa as well? It's not just one Mila. Here's another Mila. I'm sure we could come up with more. So why did the Brisa say, Mila, this is the one Mila, the one that we just explained at the very bottom of Mem Gimel on the base, wrapping up to the top? The truth is that there's more, not just about the Torah. We also have distinctions that have to do with Zrikas Hadam and whether or not you can be in the Heichal or not in the Heichal. Says the Gemara, you're right, you're correct, but the reason why we said Hamayla just means that there's one primary distinction, and that is that the Heichal is more kadosh seemingly than the space outside the Heichal between the Ulam and the Mizbeach. Gemara, you're right, it's just Shem Prisha Achasi. We're just saying that there's a category of times when there's a ring of the Isser, that you're not allowed to go into a certain space to accompany the Kohen Gadol because of the Isser that we saw on the bottom of the Gemara Beit. This brings us to an analysis of this brisa. But don't worry, it's going to be a short analysis and an easy one. Says the Gemara, Omar Mar, we learned in this brisa that we compared the need for the aloneness of the Kohen Gadol, that there's an isser for a Kohen to accompany a Kohen Gadol. We said it's true by the Ketores, and Amar Mar, quoting from the brisa, Kach, we also said it was true by Shas Matan Par Kohen Mashiach. We also said it was true that if the Kohen Gadol were to violate an isser based on its own psak, it's a Talmud Chacham, he makes a psak and he assumes that something was true, ended up being wrong, or the Parhim Davar Shal Tzibur, which had the asking is wrong for the Tzibur. Or if they also, and again in the category of Parhim Davar Shal Tzibur, that they did something specifically wrong based on the psak of Sanhedrin that led to Avodah Zarah. So Minola, how do we know that that's true? I know the Brisa says that you want to make a comparison from Torah to these three types of korbanos: the Kohen Par Mashiach, the Kohen Mashiach, Par Kohen Mashiach, Parham Davar Shal Tzibur, Sira Avodas Kochalim. How do we know? Amar Pedas, because we have by the world of Torah, we have the word kapara, as we saw in the previous Amar. Amar Pedas, Asya kapara kapar Yom Kippur. We have Gzera Shava. We have Gzera Shava from Yom Kippur from Torah to those other areas, and therefore all of them have the same restriction of having others accompany the Kohen when he's doing this avodah. Amar Rav Ada or Ava, just incorrect word here. It should be Ada, not Ava. Amar Rav Ada bar Ava, Shema Mina. One of the things that we learn from the distinctions that we've been making between the space of the Heichal and whether or not other Kohanim can be there with the Kohen Gadol, or the space outside the Heichal between the Heichal and the Mizbeach. One of the things that we learn is Milos Deoraisa, that the distinctions and elevations of Kedusha from the furthest away to Yerushalayim to the more nuanced places even within the Beis HaMikdash, that those are Deoraisa B'Hacha Gemiri Levu, and we have a tradition as much. Gemiri here, that we have a tradition that this is true. Take a look at Rashi, 6 lines down. Dibur HaMaschal Milos Deoraisa. Milos, the levels of Kedusha, Shemanu Chachamim b'Mishnah b'Maseches Kelim b'Perakama. All the distinctions listed in Maseches Kelim as to the levels of Kedusha. So the Ka'amar Hasam Harabayis Mekudash Yerushalayim, Harabayis is holier than Yerushalayim, the Hachel Mehar Habayis, and then a little bit more inside the Beis HaMikdash is more holy than the Beis HaMikdash area is holier than Harabayis, and Ve'ezras Nashem Min Hachel, and then still the space right outside of the Azara is going to be more holy, Ve'ezras Yisrael Mishal Nashem, and the space of the Yisrael, the men who are allowed to be in a certain area, 11 area, closer to the Mizbeach, closer to the Kodesh, that was holier than the section of the Nashim, Shal Kohanim, Shal Yisrael, Mizbeach, Min Azara, all the distinctions that we're talking about. The Gemara right now assumes that those are Dinei D'Oraisa. Back in the Gemara, 10 lines down, says the Gemara, the Isal Kadaitach Derabanan. If in fact you would have thought that the distinctions between the Heichal and the space outside the Heichal, between the Ulam and the Mizbeach, if you would have assumed that it was not D'Oraisa, if you would have assumed that it was Derabanan, my Shna, Bein Ha'ulam, Ulam Mizbeach, why would there be any distinction at all? It has to be that it's D'Oraisa. We would never have made that distinction. Says the Gemara, well no, we do have a real concern. Dilma, says the Gemara, Mikru V'Aili. So it says the Gemara, we're afraid people may walk in. So the Gemara retorts, if you're afraid people are going to walk in, just the Kohanim are just, blindly walking around as if they don't know the halacha. If you're worried about people making a mistake, then Mikula Azara Namine for Shudilma Mikru V'Aili. Then get out of the whole Azara. That's a space that's miyuchad the Kohanim. If you don't know what you're doing, go find another place to be. You can't just walk around blindly in the Mikdash. Everybody knows that. Says the Gemara, no, that's not really true. We do have a practical concern. And it may be that these milos are not D'Oraisa. What's our practical concern? Says the Gemara, Bein ha'ulam ulam mizbeach, in the space between the mizbeach and the ulam, kevan delam mafsik, midi, since there's no real line of demarcation in that space, lo men karamilsa. It's just a space. And it's just an open space without any framing to it. It's just literally space between the mizbeach and the wall. It's not like it's marked in red paint. So nobody is going to necessarily not make a mistake. It's possible. Lo men karamilsa. It's not clear to us that that they would just know exactly what to do. However, the Azara came on the Ikam Mizbeach, Mizbeach Achitza, and the Mafsik Min Karamilsa. But we're not concerned about the other space, the outer space of the Azara, because there, once you get closer to the Mizbeach is your reminder. In between, we weren't concerned. So therefore, maybe the Milos are not D'Oraisa, and maybe we're being a little more restrictive, Bein Ulam and Mizbeach, because there's no real lines of demarcation in that space. Amar Rava. Rava says, Shemami no. Another inference can be made from today's discussions. 1/3 of the way down, then Dalet on the base. Dushas Ulam v'Heichal Chadam They'll see that the sanctity of the Ulam, the antechamber, and the sanctity of the Heichal, not outside, not the space between the Mizbech and the Ulam itself. Those are the huge doors of the Mizbech, 40 amos tall, 20 amos wide, and that's a small, thin, rectangular room that is the antechamber, the room just before the Heichal. So that room and the Heichal, those two rooms are one level of Kedusha. Because if you want to say that there really are two Kedushos, that's a problem. Ulam Gufe Gzera. We know already from another Marimakom, the Gemara here quotes a Gemara in Beitza. The Gemara says that the Ulam itself was Gzera. V'nekum v'nigzor Gzera l'Gzera. And now we're gonna start making extra rules. It can't be. So therefore, it must be that the Ulam and the Heichal is going to be problematic. What does this mean? It means that if we know that the Ulam is the Rabbanon, we're not going to add another level of rabbinic concern to the space outside of the Ulam, between the Ulam and the Mizbeach. That would be Gzera l'Gzera. The Anan Nekum, the Nigzor Gzera l'Gzera. We don't do that. We only do one level of restriction under Moses. Says the Gemara, well, your assumption is not necessarily correct. Ulam, ubein ulam lemizbeach hadakdushay. Heichal ulam, shtei kedushos. It's not correct. Says the Gemara, the ulam, ubein ha'ulam, lemizbeach hadakdushay. The ulam and the space outside is one kedusha. Heichal ulam, shtei kedushos. And really, the heichal and the kodesh are not really the same. So the grouping is done differently. The heichal is a part of the space outside the heichal, between the heichal and the outside the heichal, between the heichal and the mizbeach. That's one kedusha, and then we elevate kedusha not in the ulam. You go into the ulam, into the antechamber room, and then crossing the threshold into the heichal is the next level of kedusha. That brings us to the two dots halfway down. Almost done. We're going to get to 5 lines to the bottom of the page. We always use the silver one. Why did we make it out of gold? My time says the Gemara Torah Chasam Lamon and Shal Yisrael. That everything needs to be made out of gold. The Kadosh Baruch Hu was sensitive about the expenditures for the Beis Hamikdash. The Hayom Chosev Shel Zav Ubohayim Achnes. But on Yom Kippur we did taka use gold, and he wouldn't change it into another kli before he would go inside the Kodesh. He would just carry this one. My time Mishum Chol Shadikon Gadol. It's a schlep. You gotta go up the mizbeach and go get the coals. You gotta come in here. You're switching it from the silver to the gold. Forget it. He's exhausted. He's fasting. He's running around like crazy the whole day. We want to be sensitive. The Kohen Gadol. We did not make him change utensils, but because he's going in the Kodesh, we wanted it to be gold and not silver. It says the Gemara. Very interesting. The Mishnah says that you take 4 kabin of coals and you dump them into a container that only holds 3. What happens to the rest? Okay, so says the Gemara, Tananis Pazrulo, Kav Gechalim, because you started with 4 and your container only holds 3. So what you're going to find is that there's 1 kav of coals all over the ground. So that, what does the Gemara say? You should sweep them up. You should clean it up. To be mechabed et sabayis. That language in halacha is meant to sweep a house. Why? Remember, all the Kohanim were barefoot. Not a good idea to have embers lying around. So they would get some kind of broom that wouldn't catch fire, and they would brush all of the extra coals into the amma, into the water system that ran through the mikdash. So the problem is that makes sense to say that there was 1 kav left over. Tani kav kav. Our Mishnah, this brisa here, says that there's only 1 kav left over. However, Betanya Idach, another brisa says kabayim, that it wasn't 1 kav, there were 2 kavim left over. But the math, because our Mishnah writes that we started with 4 and poured it into a container of 3. 4 minus 3 is 1. How can the other brisa say that there were 2 kav? It says the Gemara, Bishlama hachtatani kav Rabbana. This we understand the sheet of the Rabbanon. That's our Mishnah. That's our case. We started with 4 kav of gold, and we ended up with a kli of 3, 1 left over. Sweep it into the amma, into the aqueduct. All this fine. Ella hachtatani kabayim money. How does that work? Lo Rabbanon v'lo Rabbi Yossi. This doesn't match any of the sheet that's in our Mishnah. So the Gemara presents 2 answers. It's him. He's the Baal Plukta here. It's a brisa that is not included, not woven into our Mishnah. That's why we didn't see Amari Makom before. But really, it's Rabbi Shmuel ben Moshe Yochanan ben Baruch. What does he say? Tanya, 3/4 of the way down. Rabbi Shmuel ben Moshe Yochanan ben Baruch Omer b'shel kabayim hayamachnes. No, it was shel kabayim, that he was pushing 2 of them into the mikdash. And basically, he had a larger container. He was making it. He took more than I'm sorry, let me say again. Shel kabayim hayamachas, he was taking the 4 and dumping it into a container that only held 2. So it makes more sense. So you have 4 kavin minus a kli that's smaller. Our Mishnah said the kli that we were pouring the coals into was 3 kavin. That's incorrect. Rabbi Shmuel ben Osher Yochanan Baruch says it was only 2. So 4 minus 2 is 2 left over, and that's what it's one. Rashi Amar Filu Tamer Rav Yossi. We could even say like the author of our Mishnah, one of the authors of our Mishnah. Here's midbaris. A saw normally has 6 kav, but a saw midbaris is a little bit smaller. It only has 5 kav. On Rav Yossi, that would work in our Mishnah because Mara Latoch Shloshas kav in Yerushalmis. He was taking a unit of 5 kavin and pouring it into a kli of 3 kavin, leaving over 2. And that explains that other brisa that says that there are 2 kavin left over. Every day the utensil he would use was heavier. Today it's lighter. Normally the galda, the walls of this kli were much heavier. But hayom today they were rach, they were much thinner. It means soft, but here it means thinner in context. And it continues the Gemara. Normally the handle was short. Today the handle was long on Yom Kippur my taima. The reason why is because the Kohen Gadol could then use some leverage, and he could hold with one hand, as I highlighted yesterday, he can hold the pole, the shovel with one hand, and then rest the other part of the pole under his arm, and just kind of have a little bit of a leverage system, which makes it a little bit easier. Every day there was no ring, a ring that would make sound. There was no ring that was on this kli. And here we did have a ring on it because Kodesh, you had to make some sounds when you walk into the Kodesh. So that's what Rashi said. So take a look at Rashi, 3 lines from the bottom. Miashtek Tabas, there was a ring Berosha, and it said Shemekashkesh, and it would clank against the metal. Mashmiya kol, and it would make a sound. Mishum v'nishma kolo bivo, to make sure that the Kohen would be generating some sound, because during the year, the big day Kohen, the big day Kahuna had the Paramon Zahavarima, and Yom Kippur he didn't have it. So that's what this did. When he would walk, the ring would clank against it to make sure that the Voa la Kodesh, that it was v'nishma. We're going to stop right here. Mir Hashem will pick up tomorrow with Omer Rifizda on the bottom of Memdalat and base. Wishing you all a beautiful day.